The Peloton Tread is on its way back, baby. That's right. I have some updates to share with you about the Peloton Tread Plus today and why I think it's going to be back sooner than you might think, as well as some changes that Peloton is making to the Tread Plus, what we can expect its price to be, and some other things to consider. And if you're a fan of Peloton or home fitness tech or just appreciate unbiased reviews that get right to the point without wasting your time, then consider liking this video or even perhaps subscribing to Connect the Watts if you want to see more videos just like this. Okay, so let's rewind a bit to learn a little bit more about the Peloton Tread Plus, because it was actually released as a luxury treadmill back in 2018 and was just called the Peloton Tread, but was later renamed the Peloton Tread Plus when Peloton decided to release a smaller, less expensive treadmill, which is what we now know as the Peloton Tread, and they released that back in 2020. Then in early 2021, a small kid was unfortunately killed by the Peloton Tread Plus. And as terrible as that is, it's not that uncommon an occurrence. For example, back in 2009, Mike Tyson's 4-year-old daughter was killed while playing on a treadmill. So as sad as this is, these things do happen just given the nature of the treadmill itself, which is why it's important that treadmills be turned off and the safety key taken out when not in use. So anyway, the kid who died from the Peloton Tread Plus, what happened is the Peloton Tread Plus has no real safety in the back, and so objects, animals, and unfortunately even kids can get sucked underneath it, and in this case the kid suffocated. But the thing was, it wasn't just that one kid. In fact, upon review of the Peloton Tread Plus and the problem that led to this death, that is when the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, or the USCPSC, really started digging into it and found over 72 reports of adults, kids, and pets that had been pulled under the treadmill in that same fashion. Which is quite a lot considering that the treadmill was still fairly new and there wasn't like a huge number of these things that had been sold, as treadmills were really never as popular for Peloton as their bikes. Although interestingly, they are much more popular than bikes for pretty much every other company. So anyways, after some fighting back and forth, Peloton eventually agreed to listen to the USCPSC and recall the Peloton Tread Plus so they could eventually find a new solution that would provide the same level of safety as other treadmills on the market. Peloton also decided to recall their smaller Peloton Tread at the same time, but this was due to a separate reason, being that the screens were not connected too well, and there had been a growing number of reports of people who had their screen coming off and hitting them during the middle of a run. So, if you're going to get some bad press and everything that comes with a recall, you might as well rip off the Band-Aid and just do everything at once, and that's exactly what they did. And because the problem on the smaller Peloton Tread was a pretty easy fix, it didn't really take them too long to make that adjustment and to start selling them again. The fix for the Peloton Tread Plus, though, Peloton continued to say would be a much longer process to really change that machine in a way to take it up to acceptable safety standards. And it has been a while. And in fact, it's been close to 2 years now since the Peloton Tread Plus was recalled, with not too many signs that a fix was ready until now. A new patent has finally been filed by Peloton, first spotted by Bob Tremor on Twitter, of the new design being implemented for the Peloton Tread Plus. The new design features a double guard system with both a small rigid guard and a larger flexible one under the belt that could prevent objects and small fingers getting stuck in any gaps under the belt. The patent application describes this as, quote, "Thus the flexible guard may be configured to prevent objects from moving under the treadmill without providing a pinch point or other small gap between the guard and the surface or belt, in which a user's body part could become trapped. The inner wall or rigid guard may form a small gap, which could be a possible pinch point, but the rigid guard is placed or positioned under the treadmill at the back of the channel and thus at a position that is generally inaccessible or unreachable to a user. Therefore, the guard assembly can facilitate the blocking or prevention of objects moving under the treadmill via the moving surface or belt without exposing small gaps between components to users of the treadmill, among other benefits." End quote. So in this picture, you can see that this is the rigid guard, and here's what looks to be similar to what you might see on escalators and looks to be more of like the soft guard to prevent things like small objects or fingers or whatever from falling in. The patent also notes that the rear guard could trigger a mechanical function to turn off or slow down the treadmill in certain conditions. So if something did fall in somehow, maybe it could sense that and shut everything down. Of course, this patent filing doesn't necessarily mean that the USCPSC has approved this design or reviewed it, But this patent was filed back in September 2022 and only recently became publicly available. And as Bob Tremore noted, it is very likely that Peloton did have this approved by the USCPSC, or they wouldn't have wasted the time and energy to file it. So what does that mean? Well, the fact that it was filed in September and likely given the go-ahead to be produced, Peloton is likely at this point just waiting for the right time to release the Peloton Tread Plus. And given their history, Peloton almost always has released new products like this toward the end of the year, but will likely make a statement once they begin production. And so I believe you will be seeing the Peloton Tread Plus being announced fairly soon, likely during whatever it is they're going to be doing for this year's Peloton Homecoming, which is the event where they officially announced the Peloton Row last year. And then you'll probably be able to pre-order it or ultimately have it shipped to you near the holidays, likely between September and January. The only reason I think this scenario, though, may not play out is because last October, Peloton did extend the deadline until November 2023 for owners of the Peloton Tread Plus to return it for a full refund. So it may not be reasonable of them to announce that the new Peloton Tread Plus is coming until after that deadline has passed. And if so, they might have to delay the announcement and release until early 2024, which I hope is not the case, but I think it depends on how much money they think they might lose due to refunds should they announce a release prior to November this year. And I think this is important to know, especially if you are considering getting a Peloton Tread, as you may want to wait for that nicer Peloton Tread Plus instead. Because while the smaller Peloton Tread is a nice treadmill, it isn't great by any stretch of the imagination. It's a solid mid-tier treadmill, a bit overpriced at $3,500 as it was raised up from its previous price by about $1,000 last year. But nonetheless, it's a good treadmill, but by all accounts from anybody who has ever used the Peloton Tread Plus, that is a much better treadmill with a much larger slated running belt, which is very comfortable to run on and a big step up from a more traditional running belt that the regular Peloton Tread uses. But like I said, it'll be much, much more expensive. In fact, let me know in comments, how much more do you think the new Peloton Tread Plus will cost? Because I think we can sort of make a reasonable guess here. Like previously, back when the Peloton Tread was $2,500, the Peloton Tread Plus was being sold at $4,295. Since then, however, the Peloton Tread did receive that $1,000 markup, and so at a minimum, I would expect the same markup for the Peloton Tread Plus and assume that it's going to be released at around the $5,295 price point, although it could be even more given that there is more to this treadmill now that they've made more of these changes. And if you have the older Peloton Tread Plus and are wondering if you can have it easily fixed up to include this new safety guard, I don't think that's going to be the case, as this seems very much like you would need an entirely new treadmill to be able to install this based on the diagrams in the patent. So I don't think that the old Peloton Tread Pluses will be able to get an easy adjustment to include this. Now, if you want to learn more about the Peloton Tread, I did do a complete review on it. You can check that out here. As always, appreciate you being here with me. This is Colin Jenkins with Connect the Watts, and I'll see you next time.